get on the calls now, build the relationships that help people understand how they are going to benefit from your solution in terms of real dollars. And that way, when the economic situation gets to a place where they're going to be able to move forward, they're all teed up and ready to do a deal with you.
Welcome to Outside Sales Talk, where we meet with industry experts to learn the strategies and tactics that make them successful. I'm your host, Steve Benson, and I've helped thousands of salespeople all over the world crush their quota. Today, I'll help you crush yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Outside Sales Talk. We have a special episode today. We're going to turn the tables and put me in the hot seat, and Badger Maps' own customer success strategy and operations lead, Pien de Meulemeester, will be joining me from Badger's office in Spain and interviewing me on the topic of leading your sales team through an economic crisis. Thanks for joining me today, Pien.
Excited to be here and really excited to dive deeper into the topic for our listeners. So are you ready to jump into it, Steve?
Let's do it.
Awesome. What are the new challenges a sales leader needs to overcome in a bad economy that they might not have been thinking about before?
Well, the first are new challenges from desperate competitors doing desperate things. A lot of companies are really hurting right now, and they're willing to do things that they would not have been willing to do before. So what types of things could a desperate competitor do? They could deeply discount their product or service. They could liquidate their inventory to keep making ends meet and just keep the boat floating. They could give away free things that are of value, like free consulting or anything that would sweeten the deal to steal your customers away from you, even though it might not be sustainable. And then the second thing that you might run into in terms of what new challenges you might run into would be new challenges from your prospects and your customers. So you might get resistance from customers that wasn't there before. They might not want to engage. They might not want to meet in person. They might not want to just go through the process with you to make a purchase. They may have other priorities. If someone didn't want to meet with you before, now they really have a fantastic excuse, right? So you could run into resistance to spending money. So a lot of companies have spending freezes coming down from the top. So even if the person that is your sponsor or really would be benefiting from your product or service wants to do business with you, they just may not be allowed to spend the money. And then also you're going to run into aggressive procurement offices who, their job is to get discounts and better terms and generally jam down your margins. And they're going to leverage the down economy to do that, to negotiate better terms, cheaper terms from you, and compress your margins.
So many companies are experiencing margin compression right now. What actions can a sales manager take to react in a bad economy to their margins compressing?
Well, if you have a product with tightening margins, or if your margins need to be defended in these times, which is pretty common, if your reps are currently comped on revenue, you can consider switching your compensation plan to compensating your reps on profit margin. And the reason that you would do this is if you're, just for example, imagine your profit margins are 30% and your rep gives a 15% discount. You just gave away half of your margin, and you would need two deals in under circumstances like that to be worth as much as the deal was at full margin in good times. So if your rep's compensation plan is aligned with revenue, that 15% discount only costs them 15% of their commission. But if your comp plan is aligned with profit, that 15% discount just costs them half of their commission. So if you align the comp plan to the profit line and so the revenue line, you're incentivizing your reps to defend the margins better. And in general, you always want to design comp plans to be aligned with your business and what it needs. And I'm not saying change your reps' pay or change their on-target earnings. making a change like this would just means that you're changing the plan to reward the reps that are generating the most profit, which is what's important in these times. And this having your comp plan aligned to profitability, not revenue, is very common in industries with tighter margins. And some industries right now in a down economy are just finding themselves basically becoming tighter margin industries, at least for the time being. And so they should make this shift to behaving like a tighter margin business.
Revenue is the lifeblood of businesses. What do sales leaders need to change in their behavior in a time of crisis to keep revenue flowing?
Yeah, an economic crisis is probably the hardest time to be a sales leader because the whole company depends on the revenue that your team produces just to survive. So sales leaders need to be truly great leaders in a time of crisis. So yeah, what do they have to change? Now more than ever, I think leaders need to confront reality and be action oriented. They need to be honest in their assessments of the challenges facing the organizations, and they need to embrace bad news and ask hard questions, all while maintaining a positive outlook and building an action plan. Um, they need to be transparent with their team about what that plan is, too. That's really important. I think a lot of people skip that part. Managers need to be more responsive than normal, and they need to be extra supportive of their sales reps. You know, the team's probably scared. They're worried about losing their jobs, how hard it's going to be to get another job, their commission check evaporating. And remember, your reps weren't paying their mortgage based on their base, right? They got to sell things to get their bonus, and they this is a hard time to do that at the same level as they were. So, what are the actions that you can take as a sales leader? You need to guide your team. You need to coach your team. I would say 50% of your time should be spent coaching your reps as a good rule of thumb. If you're not spending 50% of your time coaching your reps, I'd look for ways to spend more time. You can't go silent, which is super easy to do in a remote world. And you gotta, instead of being silent, you have to ask your reps questions and find out what they need from you to be successful, what they need from the organization to be successful. Figure out who on the team is having success right now and how they're having success, with what type of customer, what the playbook for that success is. And then with that rep that has kind of cracked the code of being successful right now, using with their help, you can train the team to run the plays that they're running and do things in the way that they're doing it, so you can replicate that success across the team. I think a great sales leader understands what's going on at the ground level, and that you really have to understand what's going on with your reps at the ground level to steer the ship well. One thing to look at is reassessing the KPIs that you're using to measure the team, because what the team is focused on might need to change in order to be responsive and be successful in the current situation that we're looking at from an economic perspective.
How does a sales leader need to change their KPIs and the way they measure their sales teams in a recession?
Well, managers need to change their focus towards forward-looking KPIs, not just the lagging KPIs that we often use as sales managers. The classic being, the lagging KPI being current revenue or current profitability. It's easy to just look at sales right now because cash is king, so you kind of are drawn to that more than ever. But as you evaluate your reps, you need to remember to keep an eye on who's building pipeline, who's generating meetings, and who's generating the business activity that's going to turn into generating revenue in the future. I think in general, if you're a sales manager, you need to look to realign your KPIs and your metrics to kind of focus on the areas that your team is struggling in this economy. So what do I mean by that? If your team is having trouble pipeline building, You need to count lead generation numbers like meetings and scheduling of qualified deals, and meetings with the buyer, or with the person that has the ability to make a purchase. If your challenges are more middle of the funnel, you need to focus on the number of presentations or number of proposals to decision makers. If you're having trouble closing, you can work on negotiation skills and look at value selling to dig into qualification. One way to a KPI you can use there is the amount of discount given. If you're struggling with margins, especially tracking what discounts you're giving on each deal and trying to figure out why it ended up where it ended up is a great way to protect your margins. The all these metrics are secondary to revenue, obviously, right? Like which, although it's lagging, is always the most important, revenue and profitability. But if you focus too much of your attention on these KPIs that are counting things other than revenue or profit, you can get really skewy results in terms of your reps focusing on things that aren't revenue producing. So while everything needs to be measured and coached around, I don't recommend putting too much weight in terms of like the comp plan on anywhere except for cleasing deals and on revenue, because these other metrics like proposals given or presentations, if you really leverage someone's comp plan based on that, what's going to happen is you're going to get more proposals and you're going to get more presentations, but you're not necessarily going to generate more revenue. And so it's dangerous to have your reps optimize themselves around these metrics. But it's good to look at these metrics in addition to revenue and profitability, especially in these times where you don't just want to look at the lagging, but want to be able to look forward into the future as you evaluate people.
What do you think are the areas that reps commonly need coaching in a down economy?
Well, yeah, coaching and up-leveling your team's skills are both so important in a down economy. And really, frankly, in any time of change, that's the first thing you should look to is how can I help the team get through this time of change? But in this economy, we're all kind of in an adjustment phase where, and I really think sales managers should be spending 50% of their time coaching their team. And coaching means a lot of things. Coaching can be pre-call strategizing, could be post-call debriefing, can be joint calls, ride-alongs. It can be opportunity-specific coaching. Anything that makes your reps and makes the team better counts towards that 50% rule of coaching, rule of thumb. I guess in terms of what needs to be coached, it probably really depends on the team, depends on the industry, but I guarantee there's a greater need in these times of change and economic turmoil than there ever otherwise would be. An obvious place is negotiation, specifically how to defend margins and how to sell value is one thing that probably every team could freshen up on. Another specific area that almost everyone will need coaching on is building pipeline. We often need to relearn to prospect and rethink who we are selling to in a bad economy, because the best buyer for our product or service may have shifted a little bit, or even sometimes it could have shifted a ton, right? The good news is that in terms of generating new pipeline in this economy, we are seeing people picking up the phones and engaging with new ideas in a way that we haven't seen in decades, because they have the time and the bandwidth to do so. And so people have the time to evaluate new vendors, and they're motivated to find new vendors who can help them solve the problems that they're facing. So coaching on pipeline building and rethinking how your team is attacking the market is a great use of a sales leader's time right now.
How can a sales leader take advantage of prospects actually picking up the phone and being open to new ideas, because a down economy forces them to be open to change?
Yeah, it's time to pick up the phone, right? Because people are answering it. So decision makers who would have been impossible to reach this time last year are now picking up their phones when you call them. They're quarantined, they're bored, they're lonely, they're willing to talk and engage. If you can run some plays there that are working with picking up the phone, then then because people are actually answering, then and you find some plays that are specifically working for your team. It's a good idea as a sales manager to shift more resources that you have in your sales team towards lead generation. So that might mean taking someone who usually works on deployments and having them make outbound calls to generate leads, because you may not have enough deployments to keep them busy, and they can generate new business with those phone calls. And if that's the case and you try that out and it works, then that's exactly what you should do, is shift resources around. Maybe change the goals that the team has. If maybe a rep was supposed to interact with an existing customer that was a quote unquote a C-level customer, every 6 months. Well, maybe now you've got the bandwidth to do it every 3 months. You can also rethink the balance of your sales development reps. So the SDRs, those are the types of reps that generate leads for the reps that are actually closing deals, your account executives, your hunters. And then also you can rethink the balance of your farmers, your deployment team, your customer success reps, the representatives that manage existing customers. You can rethink how many people are in each group, and maybe move a few from this group to that group. A survey right before coronavirus started said that about a third of all salespeople don't prospect at all. And having SDRs focused on lead generation is a great way to fix this by using that specialization. And if it's working, shift more resources into that role. And maybe this is also a time to move some farmers back into hunting roles. They have extra time on their hands. Maybe you've lost some customers, or your current customers' business is down. So your customers have fewer needs, and are able to take or are taking less time from your customer success reps, and so you can have them move more into lead generation. And the guy that wrote the book on this is Aaron Ross. He's a sales leader at Salesforce in its early days, 20 years ago, and he wrote a book called Predictable Revenue. I had him on my podcast earlier, and a few months ago, and it was. If you want a quick summary of what his ideas are, but the breaking up of a sales team, you almost always see sales teams in software, for example, broken up this way. But I run into industries all the time where they'll have a sales rep managing a territory. They're in charge of the existing customers, the new business, the lead generation, and I often find that if a sales manager breaks up the skill sets in the way that is outlined in that book, that they'll get a lot of benefit out of that. But yeah, I mean, get people to pick up the phone, because excuse making and rationalization on why it's impossible to be successful, they're at an all-time high right now. And honestly, there's a really great excuse not to succeed right now if people are looking for one. And if someone's looking for the perfect excuse to quit, we just got it. We have it, in spades. But if someone still has fire and still wants to win, now's the time to dig deeper. And as a sales leader, that's a part of your job, is to inspire the team to win even in tough times. So bottom line, take advantage of people being willing to engage right now, and shift more of your sales resources into engaging with them and generating leads. Get your message in front of your current ideal buyer, who might not have been the same as your historical ideal buyer, and build out your pipeline for the future.
How can a company change their messaging to build a pipeline and resonate more with prospects in a recession?
Well, I think in a down economy, you often need to change your messaging from some form of quote will help you do better. And this is what you see this everywhere in people's messaging, right at the top of their website, to what the sales reps are saying. And that's been great in a good economy for the last 10 years or whatever. Like, well, we'll help you do better. How are you? You're doing good. We'll help you do better. But in a down economy, you need to change your messaging from that type of messaging to, quote, we'll help you do more with less. And then you need to show your prospects how much more in terms of dollars that you'll be able to help them do more with less. And this could be less money, it could be less manpower, it could be less resources, whatever it is. Example of this, I can use myself as an example here. So I just went through this exercise with my sales team at Badger Maps. Our messaging historically has been, we'll help you sell 20% more with your field sales team, right? And now we switched the messaging to, with Badger Maps, your outside sales team can generate the same revenue even though your team is 20% smaller. So the message is, we'll help you do more with less. And there's a huge difference between these two messages, even though they effectively boil down to the same thing, but positioning the message in the second way will resonate way better with your prospects than the original messaging will in a down economy.
Businesses are under pressure to reduce costs. In fact, many boards and CEOs may look at high expense of sales and marketing as a way to reduce costs. If you are a VP of sales and being told to reduce costs right now, how would you approach it?
Good question. Well, first, I come from the perspective that salespeople are the engine of revenue in a business organization. So, if revenue is important to an organization, sales is probably one of the last places that you want to make cuts. That being said, if there are weak links on the team and you have to make cost improvements or cut costs, that's one of the first places to look. So look at low performers that you probably would have ended up letting go anyway. Look at newer reps that haven't scaled up all the way or maybe aren't scaling the way you'd like them to. But cut carefully with sales and cut from the bottom and work your way up slowly. When thinking about where the weak links are in a team, remember that the world has changed, right? So as you look at your team, know that it's not a candidate's market anymore. It's a buyer's market, meaning we're coming off an economy that had very low unemployment, and it was impossible, basically, not impossible, but really hard to hire great sales talent. And now there's relatively high unemployment, and there's lots of great reps out there that would love to work at your company. So keep that in mind, that you might be able to up level the weaker links on your team right now.
I want to push you further for all the companies that need to make bigger changes. What if the cuts have to go deeper? What if the CEO comes to you as a VP of sales and says, thank you for reducing the cost of your team by 15% in April. Now I'm going to need you to take things down another 20%.
Sure, and I'm sure that's a message that a lot of VPs of sales have gotten to. We made early cuts, and we gotta do some more because things are still not bad, not bounced back from in the recession. We're still in tough times. So, okay, so if you need to cut deeper and you need to get the cost of the team down even more, and you're down to, let's assume that you're down to people that you don't want to cut, meaning in the first round is when you took care of any weak links in the team. I guess you have two choices that you're looking at. One is fire some really good people that you don't want to fire, or two, lower all the good people's salaries across the board. And these are obviously both really bad options, but let's take them in turn. So first, firing people that you don't want to. I guess the classic wisdom on the business school MBA advice on layoffs is, if you're going to do layoffs, you want to do them all at once. You don't want to do lots of cuts. Several rounds of layoffs will damage morale. It'll keep people from being focused. if everyone's kind of looking over their shoulder and saying, oh, am I next? And they spend time looking at other employment options, et cetera. So you want to do, one big cut and be done with it, right? Now, that classic wisdom should be probably questioned when you're looking at the sales team, and specifically today with COVID, because we could come out of this with a relative bounce. Things can kind of go back to not perfectly normal, but relative normal once we push a vaccine, et cetera. So, you might want to think twice about making big cuts, and kind of it may be better to kind of do it as you need to. And people may understand that and not be looking around quite so much, because they know, that we could, there is kind of a timeline on this recession, which is different than maybe other recessions we've had in the past. So laying off your lowest performer on the team as you absolutely need to in order to keep afloat may be better than making that one big cut, and pretending that is this crisis going to be short or long term. These are just uncertain times, and you don't want to cut deeper than you have to. So I guess there's kind of two sides to that classic wisdom, or two thoughts on that classic wisdom. So let's talk about the second option two. So spend less by lowering everyone's pay, but not furloughing or firing a bunch of people. If you have to cut your sales team's salary, it's better, in my opinion, to lower the base than it is to lower the bonus, because if you lower the bonus, it takes away their incentive that they had to sell and bring in revenue, which is paying for the whole company's salaries, right? Your best reps probably care a lot more about their bonus than their base anyway, and your worst reps conversely care about the base the most. One way that you can balance this out that I've seen go over relatively well and kind of feels fair all around is to lower everyone's salary at the company by 20%. And this is obviously dependent on how much revenue you've lost. I mean, maybe your company's lost 30%, maybe it's lost 10%, but let's just say that you're short 20%. You lower everyone's salary by 20% across the board, and tweak it for the sales team in that you lower their base a little. If everyone was getting a 20% haircut, you would focus the cut on the base salary, but leave the sales team's bonuses untouched. And then in conjunction with that, you also reduce the work week to 4 days a week. And there's a lot of research and there's a lot of examples of people trying this out, reducing the work week for 4 days a week and not having that big of a hit on productivity. And just give everybody, and maybe you give different people different days off. Maybe you stack it all on Wednesdays. It's better to do a day in the middle of the week than a Friday or a Monday, because a 3-day weekend is kind of a party, whereas giving everyone a Wednesday off kind of focuses them to, they do personal work, et cetera, on a Wednesday. We actually had Wednesdays off in business school, and it made it kind of like a study day and catch up on life day. But anyway, depending on if your business can all be off the same day, or if you want to peanut butter kind of across the week. But the real benefit here is that everybody keeps their health insurance, everybody keeps their job. Maybe they're not that hurt about it because they're like, well, I'm working less, so I'm getting paid less, but I'm able to cover my mortgage, my rent, whatever. And I've got, I've still got my health insurance, et cetera. So that is a swallowable way to do this, and still cut a bunch of costs out of the company. And keep in mind, right, as a sales leader who has the CIO or the CEO leaning on them hard, saying you need to make deep cuts, you need to go deeper. It's a part of your job is to show them how much reps cost versus how much money they bring in, and break it down on a monthly basis, right? Because a lot of companies are having a tough time thinking about anything but the next couple months. But I've seen companies where reps are bringing in $750K a year, and they cost $150K, and they start firing a bunch of reps, and actually those reps were paying for themselves on and then a lot more on a monthly basis. So sure, you just saved 150K, but you just lost 750K in revenue. And sure, sometimes you can be like, oh well, we're just gonna keep piling all the deals on John over here. He'll take care of all of them. He's really good. But like John only has so many hours in a day, and you there is going to be friction there, moving deals around and taking reps out of a territory, and it's you have to be very, as a VP of sales, use numbers when you're talking to these guys, the CEO and the CIO, or CFO, whoever it is pushing on this. um, and a good example of this. So the reason most people don't stop their Google ads in a down economy is because the VP of marketing is able to show the CFO that for every dollar they spend, they get back $1.50 at the end of the month, right? And so Google makes it really easy to track and to show this. But as a sales leader, you can do the same thing. You can use numbers to show that CFO or CEO, whoever, that your sales team, and you can show them how much they're going to lose if they fire these sales reps.
In a down economy, most people aren't thinking about recruiting. I believe that there are a lot of great salespeople on the market right now looking for a job. What are your thoughts on recruiting in a down economy?
I think it's a great time to recruit. The market for hiring great salespeople has been really bad for years, really hard to hire great people, and I feel like it's never been better. There are really talented salespeople who have been laid off or furloughed or whose companies are in trouble. So you can look to recruit them, and if you do have the capital, and look to invest in getting more sales for your business in the future. Um, and a way to think about this is if they're going to bring in more money, and it has to be at the margin, right? It doesn't count if you would have gotten this money anyway with your existing team, but if they will bring in more money at the margin than they cost, then why wouldn't you hire them? So a lot of companies, I believe, underinvest in sales. Um, and some reps on your team maybe were able to succeed in good times, but aren't really geared to be successful in bad times or hard times. And you need, a part of your job as the VP of sales is to replace them with people who can succeed. And as a sales leader, sales manager, you know who they are. And so I guess second part of your question, what do you need to hire great salespeople? You need to be specific about the criteria that a candidate would need to be successful in the specific sales role that you have. And you need to write those criteria down, and then you need to qualify candidates for the role based on their characteristics that you can display to them and make transparent to them in the hiring process that you've designed, so that and so that both they know what they're going to need to be successful, and also you and the team that are hiring them, the HR team, the other people doing the interviews, know what they are, so that you're able to actually design a process that filters for people that have those characteristics. You also, so yeah, make sure you're specific in your job posting about what they need to have so that you attract the right people onto the role. And you don't, conversely, you shouldn't put things in the job posting that don't need to be there. You see this all the time, right? Like if you don't need an MBA from an Ivy League school to be successful in the role, don't ask for that, because and if you don't need 7 years of experience to be successful in this role, don't ask for it. Because what happens is if you put things like that, kind of these reach, lofty things that you'd love, nice to haves, but not necessary, what you end up doing is scaring off candidates that would have been successful with these false requirements. I'd rather get a ton of applicants for a sales role and then give them a 5-minute sniff test with a quick phone interview than only have a few applicants and end up picking the best one out of that pool of applicants, but because it was small, none of them are really the right fit.
What does a solid recruiting process look like in a down economy?
Well, I think sales leaders need to rethink what their reps need to be successful in this economy, and they need to adjust their recruiting process to bring in reps that fit that mold. That means marketing the role right. It means acquiring a bunch of applicants that meet the specifications that you need. I think you need a great job posting that clearly outlines exactly what applicants need to have, it shouldn't just be one that describes your company and why it's so great to work there. I always see that in job postings, right? Um, you want the right people to apply when they see the job posting and the wrong people to be scared off. And you can do that by being transparent and really being specific. An applicant tracking system, I think, is really helpful and can keep everything straight and organized for the different people who are involved in the recruiting process. There are a bunch of these in the market, obviously, right? It, if you're small enough that you really don't need one, like you're not making that many hires, then sure, you can just use a Google Doc. But there's a reason these applicant tracking systems are useful as soon as you are a sophisticated organization. And I don't know where that exactly comes into play. I guess it depends on the amount of hiring that you're doing. If you're hiring more than 10 roles a year or something, you're probably getting too complex for a Google Doc or a spreadsheet. But I think leaders also need challenges or tests that you can give a candidate to prove that they have what the team needs right now. And this allows the leader to make the hiring decision and compare their actual performance in a non-biased, scorable way against other applicants. Have them, overcome an objection in real time. Have them pitch with you. Have them negotiate with you. Whatever skills that you identify that a sales rep is going to need to have to be successful on your team, make sure you create little tests and challenges in the recruiting process that allow the rep to display to you that they have those skills. Also, have the offer all worked out way before it comes time to give them one. This shouldn't hold the process, right? You always see this where they're like, okay, we want to hire this guy. What's the offer? Like how? And then you got to get a bunch of sign-offs and approvals in place, et cetera. And especially in times like these when the purse strings might be tight, you don't want the CFO to have to sign off on the comp package and it's a competitive hire may have several offers at the same time, and you don't want to lose a person that's great because you don't have your ducks in a line on that. And I guess the last piece that comes to mind, having a solid onboarding process in place for your new hires. I think that's really important, and often people don't think about. And onboarding processes do need to be rethought right now. They need to rethink through what the process is. In particular, if you were able to get away with not having the best practices in place because a new rep was kind of able to learn by osmosis, hanging around the office. Now that everyone's remote, you're going to need to have a very solid onboarding process in place.
You have a lot of expertise in field sales, and you started the software company for field salespeople, where I happen to work, Badger Maps. Field salespeople are under a ton of pressure right now, since many people can't go into the field. How do we bridge the gap of having no face-to-face visit, especially when a sales pitch is based around the customer experiencing the product in person, and the product cannot be demoed via video or other methods?
Yeah, I really agree. Not being able to meet with customers face to face is killing a lot of businesses. Some things are best sold face to face, and so if you don't do it that way, fewer deals closed. It's harder to communicate the value. Sales cycles take longer. The relationship was so important in so many circumstances, and so other strategies other than field sales are really at a disadvantage. So sales are just in a really bad place in those cases where field sales have been made impossible for the time being. I guess in these cases, the best thing to do is stay productive and keep generating new sales cycles and moving existing sales cycles downfield, even if you can't demo your product in person, obviously. You can focus on filling the top of the funnel instead of the middle and the end. The beginning of the sales funnel is easier to succeed at remotely than the end, especially if you're in one of these businesses that kind of needs to be face-to-face. So do more prospecting, build more lists, get awareness up in your territory, spend time building relationships with your ideal customers in the ways that you can. like social selling, for example, it's a great time to invest in your social selling skills. And obviously, this is a big enough topic for a book, but during the crisis here, I've had several of the top experts in leveraging social media for sales on the Outside Sales Talk podcast. That's really recommended to check out some of those episodes, and you can just jump right to those and listen to them, and you know these episodes on social selling, I think, are really worth checking out because you can learn some clever tactics that can generate new leads and deepen existing relationships that you have with your customers through social media. Um, the the best thing to do if you have to move to a remote sales model is to make the best of it. Focus on your performance for the next 12 months instead of the next 1 month. Um, and that means prospecting more, building more leads now that you can close over the next 12 months. Focus on that number. When you talk to your prospects over Zoom or on the phone, the key is to sell and be productive right now and move as many of these sales cycles forward as you possibly can, right? So usually as a sales rep, I kind of think of it as you're setting up 10 bowling pins in a month and you're rolling the ball and you're seeing what pins or deals you can knock down, right? But if you're inside and that's a real impediment to closing, but you can still set up the pins, then that's what you want to do. You don't just want to stop at 10. You want to just keep setting up pins, and set up 100 pins on the lane, and then come April of 2021 or whenever it is that things really crack for your industry, you'll be able to roll the ball through all those pins. And once the world comes back online, right? So get on the calls now, build the relationships that help people understand how they are going to benefit from your solution in terms of real dollars. And that way, when the economic situation gets to a place where they're going to be able to move forward, they're all teed up and ready to do a deal with you. And it's pretty likely that, at least I think, when things are turning back on for your customers, that's the same time that reps are going to be able to get back in front of these customers and close the deal in person. And so I think things will all kind of come together at the same time, kind of industry by industry.
What trends do you see in field sales over time in a post-COVID world? Every Zoom sales rep and every company that has a consulting practice around digital transformation would have you believe that we're going to see the death of field sales. How do you see field sales being impacted?
Well, yeah, I definitely don't believe that field sales is dead. I think in our what we see definitely is proving that out. I mean, most field sales is still going on right now, just in a distanced and safe way. I mean, face-to-face meetings are just crucial for certain types of sales. They shorten the sales cycle, they deepen relationships, and it'll always be important, I believe. It's really hard to replicate the connection that you make with a customer in person, either over Zoom or over the phone. And besides, interactions over the internet are kind of clunky and awkward, whereas in-person meetings give salespeople the opportunity to genuinely connect and really understand a customer and all their problems. People thrive off of social interactions, and in person you're able to kind of tap into that human need for connection and create real and lasting relationships. um, Also, it's definitely easier to read a room for objections and gauge how your customer truly feels in person in a way that you can't in a remote situation. And I think sales cycles also get compressed because you've got all the key people in a room and they're all figuring things out face to face with a conversation. You're able to figure out the solutions, and that moves things, cover the objections, et cetera, and that just moves things faster. Um, uh, and on the other hand, there's a lot of reasons that when all you can do is talk on the phone and Zoom, sales cycles will extend. So the good news is that as soon as your team can go outside and can get in front of customers, there are a lot of sales cycles that will be compressed and kind of come to a close at that point. And so there's kind of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow here for us. But And another point is ultimately the decision maker or the CEO, they don't care about making a sales rep drive across town to visit them. If they want you to travel to them, if it's more convenient to them, or they think it'll be a better use of their time, if they think it'll be a better experience than a phone call, and if your company doesn't have field sales reps in those types of environments, a competitor likely will, and that competitor will have an edge on you. Um, I like to liken field sales to dating. So in both dating and sales may be enhanced by the internet, but the internet will never replace in-person dates or in-person field sales, in my opinion.
Communication is so important in a crisis. What are some thoughts that you have around how a sales leader needs to change their communication in these times?
Yeah, well, in times like these, people's imaginations get the best of them, right? Particularly within large groups. Gossip of impending doom is really powerful. It travels quickly, and it can lead to rash employee decisions and morale problems. Um, Sales leaders need to communicate with their team in a transparent and realistic and optimistic way, and they need to give their team an action plan that will put their fears to rest and let them focus on selling, because once again, revenue is the lifeblood of businesses, right? People want safety and they want security. As a business leader, you're responsible for, I guess, what I would call the base layer of people's pyramid of needs, like the money they pay for food and their home, their health care, their long-term financial security too. So you're, and not to mention you're responsible for things higher on the pyramid too, their enjoyment of their life and their wants as opposed to just their needs. So one of your key responsibilities is to communicate with your team clearly and truthfully about where things are really at, and that way they can plan accordingly. And from a productivity perspective, if you don't communicate clearly and truthfully, they're going to spend all their time worrying that the worst is coming. And that's just kind of human nature, I think, when we feel like we're at risk or vulnerable. I think, specifically as a sales leader, you want to tell people what the immediate term plan is, the midterm plan, and the long-term plan, and what those plans are and how they're affected by different external factors. So meaning like, okay, if it's a small recession like this, then we're going to do this. If it's prolonged, we're going to do, it's going to affect these plans like this. And you need to make them feel comfortable that there's a steady hand on the wheel and that they can know what to expect. Having daily huddles is a good, tactical practice. Have it at the same time every day so people can kind of plan around it. Bring your team together when they're working apart. I think keep your team focused on their KPIs and help them see how everyone else is doing against their KPIs. Um, Let the team share success stories and learn from one another on what's working and what's not working, and make sure you have a way to give them the support and the guidance and the help that they may need. I mean, you can even, I've seen people do 2 huddles a day, and I don't think that's crazy or anything. And I'm talking about quick meetings, beginning or end of the day or both for 10 minutes each. But I think that's a good cadence to kind of help teams stay focused, help them communicate with each other, and you really can't over communicate in times like these.
How do your customer relationships change in these times?
Well, I guess everyone's talking about empathy right now, right? And that's pretty obvious why that's important. The good news is we all have one more thing in common right now than with everyone in the world than we used to, and I think it is a harder time for relationship building, right? In this new world that we're in, people may feel less trust, less customer loyalty, and you may notice sales cycles becoming longer as a result. And so we've got to work against that, right? And how I think the first thing that comes to mind here is leveraging your sponsor. You've got to leverage your sponsor because you need someone to be your eyes and ears within an organization. And you always needed this to be successful, right? Especially if you have a complex sales cycle. But now I would say you need this more than ever before. And your sponsor is rarely the only decision maker, right? Especially with how tight the purse strings are right now. But you want to ask your sponsor before a meeting with their team to try to uncover what the objections are from the other decision makers and the other influencers, and that way you can address them in the meeting. You want to subtly prepare them with some kind of pre-meeting call with your sponsor to bring up these key questions or to make key points to facilitate the discussion and move the ball downfield. Um, your relationship with your sponsor is so much more important when you're pitching remotely in general, I think, because you can't read the room and you can't get all the information that you could in a face-to-face situation. You don't have rapport with all the different players on the field. You can't read people's body language. You lose that natural chit chat that builds that rapport, and you probably aren't going to be able to get the relationships in place with every decision maker like the way you could in person to some degree. And so you need your sponsor to really be in touch for you and follow up with the decision makers and the influencers to get genuine feedback on what their issues are, what they think about your product or service, and that way you can work with that. With that knowledge in hand, you'll be able to better present and better move the deal towards closure. And building rapport is just harder remotely, right? It's just you know sales feels harder right now than it has before, and that's because it is. It really is. And there's a reason why field sales exists, and we have to do our best to tee things up and get sales cycles moving forward until we can get back in the field.
How do sales strategies need to change based on the way you need to sell remotely?
Well, I think qualification is more important now than ever, because if there's a reason that there can't be a deal in this sales cycle with someone, then there isn't time to waste right now, because if this isn't to be successful for whatever reason, time is of the essence, right? And a lot of companies and prospects out there aren't going to be able to spend the money, even if buying your product or service would make sense. They just don't have the money, right? And they're going to go with the cheapest product in the market no matter what. So if you are selling more of a value solution or higher value solution, the if you have to identify that you're not going to win this deal because of that, and those deals need to be qualified out so you don't waste your time. And people are generally honest. They don't like to disappoint you, but if you ask the right questions, you can get deals to qualify themselves. Well, I should cover how to do that. So you can ask. The people that I work with generally come in two categories. There's category one, they're leaning towards moving forward now, and category two, they're leaning towards being more worried about making changes in these crazy times, or they have something that keeps them from making a change in these times. Which category are you in? Category one or category two? And I think the other thing, if you have to qualify um, within the situation, is that if someone's leaning towards doing business with you, or if someone's leaning towards making a change, are they gonna do it with you, or is before you, or are they gonna have to go with the cheapest provider, et cetera? Because you want to qualify these things before you devote your resources, your company's resources, giving quotes, and spending time through a sales cycle, making a proposal, um, demos, deployments, proposals, technology, etc. You want to qualify and see if someone's going to do something, and then are they going to do something with you before you devote resources. And Getting in front of decision makers, the real decision maker, is so important right now because there are a lot of reasons for deals to get hung up, right? You got a larger percentage of deals are just being left hanging, right? So you have to get in front of the right people in the organization that you're selling to, understand what the problems are that they need to solve to be successful, and communicate how much value that the prospect will get from your product or service. If you aren't in front of the person at the prospect, who the person who's really authorized to make decisions, you probably won't get the budget authorized for the deal, right? And this is always true, but it's so much more true when purse strings are tight. The rules are just tighter, and it's harder to fudge around the edges. And you know, now, this all being said, I think you have to be careful about changing your strategies too much. And I've seen people get this wrong as often as I've seen them get it right. It's very easy to, as a sales manager, just make the mistake of blindly increase sales activity and lose the quality, lose the focus. And it's understandable, right? Fear and panic can lead managers to really want to just crank up the volume on sales activity. And sometimes it's just because they don't know what else to do, right? But quantity rarely makes up for quality. So you need to keep focusing on promising and qualified leads. If you lower your qualification standards that you already have and you've already got proven out, then you can end up doing a lot more work with very little results to show for it. So keep some focus on what makes something qualified. Consider the lead's scope, the budget, the value of your offering versus for this certain customer, and other factors that define what makes a successful client for your company. Like who is the best buyer for us, and make sure that you're selling to those types of prospects now more than ever before. And don't a lot of sales managers kind of just create busy work, try to eliminate activity for the sake of just looking and feeling busy, right? A scattershot approach is not worth the time, the effort, the anxiety, and this is not a time to create more busy work just because you feel like people have the bandwidth to do it. Another thought on this is for sales leaders to not feel like you have to control everything right now, because you can't, right? Leaders constantly ask for more information about what's happening because they really want to control the situation and they want to feel in control. And right now things can feel like they're out of control, right? And it's a great time to reduce unproductive reporting as opposed to increase it. You want to maintain a strong dashboard of the leading indicators that provide predictive measures of success at each stage in the sales process, and don't just use lagging KPIs like current revenue, right? A few forward-looking metrics will go a long way, such as new opportunities identified, the value of each opportunity at each stage, and giving new thought around what is the probability of deals moving from where they are to the next stage based on the new reality and the new close rates that your company has, right? And note that this is probably very different now that the world has changed versus when the economy was really good in February of 2020, right? So a little focus here can help guide your team's behavior towards deals that will close. Well, this has been a great episode of the Outside Sales Talk. And if anyone can think of people in sales leadership or sales management that would benefit from learning about the topics that we talked about today, share the love and forward this episode on to them. Once again, I appreciate everyone being here, and take care until next time.